Well, it's now afternoon, and we are having an amazing get together. We're lighting the candle, A World That Works, and we've got with us an old dear friend, not that old, but very dear, Lisa Sheehan, and also Doug Brown, who we're getting to know. And Doug's bringing a lot to us from South Carolina today, and we just finished sticking our big toe into Central Park in the whole theme of leadership. We had a few minutes to really have a great conversation get started. And one of the things that we wrapped up on the other side was Lisa was mentioning that the notion of what leadership is something that really can be fleshed out in a lot of different ways. That language sometimes puts limits on what people can expect or can perform or deliver. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Lisa, to kick this off?
I think it goes back to, well, being authentic too, but any word, once you see something and you put a label on it, it has your own distinct definition of it.
Yeah.
But I think, like as we were talking about leaders, that they have to present themselves their form of leadership, and it's usually quite obvious right from the get go. When I was first started out in radio, it was a family owned business, and we all got to wear different hats. We all had our specific roles by day, but through different events, and we were all invited to and enjoyed being part of the team to create a bigger and more connected audience. So, then it, of course, progressed into being owned by bigger and bigger corporations to venture capitalists. So there's not that feeling anymore, anywhere, nothing near it. So, so to see it in a tiny little area of Connecticut, where entrepreneurs and wellness practitioners, and seeing them trying to become entrepreneurs and facing the world in that way, becoming their own leaders in their own fields, but seeing there's not a lot of great examples for them to follow right now. So some of them are natural leaders and just skyrocket, and others have to look to others for influence. And fortunately, there's a lot of people like Doug, and even Ken will do that too. So there's places for people to go, thankfully. And then thankfully too, like, life coaching has become a popular alternate to to push yourself, to be accountable, to find new ways to keep your business and your personal life coordinated and working well together.
Yeah. So if we can kind of like recapture the last half hour conversation, you have this system that is encapsulated in a leadership model where there's a tremendous amount of trust and authenticity, and that it is rewarded for people to tell the truth as quickly as possible about what's not going well. And the idea with that is not necessarily that it keeps from costing the company money. It's not that at all. It's the idea that if there is a problem, it's all of our problem. And the next level after leadership is partnership. Partnership is, again, this opportunity to share the responsibility and the accountability. And if there's something that and you withhold it from a situation for whatever reason, that you're actually not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so in when I first started out in manufacturing, it was a slave master mentality, where people would stand around and watch their machines be shut off when they knew what to do in order to get them turned back on again, but they didn't want to do the wrong thing. And then watch that over a 4 or 5 year period turn into, not only did they know how to turn their machines back on, they knew how to make them go faster. They knew how to get more productivity out of it. And just by sharing ideas. So when we talk about leadership, I just made a new connection here to what comes after leadership. What if it's partnership? How would that distinction look in a functional organization?
Well, I think it's kind of a natural extension. And Lisa, what you said is interesting about when we put a label on something, it comes with baggage. All labels come with baggage. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Leadership comes with, some people think, yeah, that's what I need. Other people think, oh, that's all soft and squishy. Partnership is kind of the same thing. it so I it has lots of different meanings. I think in a business context, you want people to be able to be both leaders and followers, depending on the situation and what the team needs. So that you've also got a team of leaders, but in any given moment, somebody who's, quote, a leader has to be a follower, because that's the natural order of things. When you've got everybody working and everybody pulling their weight, then there's going to be situations where, when I was in charge of a business and I've got an operations director who was there longer than I was, and he would have an approach to something, then it wasn't, I'm like, okay, that's why I have this person. They're going to take that and they're going to lead that, and they're going to work as partnership. When I once did with one of my organizations, we had to kind of massively remodel what we were doing. So we did one back in the day, you could go on offsite, and I had the teams do all the stuff that you would do in a corporate retreat. I even had a facilitator come in, and I was the boss, so I couldn't really be the facilitator. And we had the group in 6 different teams. They each came up and put on the flip chart all of their ideas and what we should do and shouldn't do. And in a divine moment of evil inspiration, I said, that's great. We're going to get together. You're in that team now, and you are going to implement one of those things and report out in the next month. We're going to meet again. And they looked at me like they thought that I was going to do everything. So I think that was the charge. Fast forward, after much gnashing of teeth, when they asked me what I should do, I said, no, it's yours, your team. You decide what you want to do and propose. And you're going to present it to the rest of the division. I was not a very popular person. But when they presented, they blew the doors off it. Every single team came back with something amazing. And there was one, I forgot what it was. And they said, they made a recommendation. And I said, okay, do it. I'm like, what? What do you mean? I said, you thought it through, right? Yeah. It's going to work, right? Yeah. So what else do I need? Go do it. And the look in the room was remarkable. Like, wait a minute, we just did that. So I think that might be an example of the partnership where people had actual responsibility and accountability to get things done. And inside of those teams, different people were leaders on different aspects of it. Mm-hmm. And then they worked and presented as a team. And you don't have to have a corporate retreat to do that.
No, I'll tell you what. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's why, the word team has been given all sorts of new names now. You're part of the tribe, or you're part of the hive, or you're part, but it makes people feel included. And even, groups, the groups that follow famous people, they give themselves nicknames,
because they want community. People are dying for community.
Exactly.
And to identify with something that they value.
Exactly.
And they can wind up following leaders who aren't great leaders too, but they're dying for leadership and community.
I think we see a lot of that, don't we? That people mistake the outspoken for having the right ideas.
Often, yes.
And it's not even about right or wrong ideas. I think it's to recognize that, and this is one of the big lessons of COVID, is that people have a need to be with other people. They have a need to be in community. Yeah. They have a need to be in proximity to each other. It's a fundamental human need. And so, I suppose people can use that knowledge for good or evil, or ambivalence, I suppose. But when you understand how and why people behave as a leader, and to keep that partnership that you talked about, Bill, to keep that moving, somebody's always needs to be giving it guidance. Otherwise you wind up with, the everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge problem.
Well, let me just dive in a little bit deeper here. Let's talk about the Twitterverse for a moment.
Okay.
It turns out that out of 7 billion people on the planet, what do we think? Maybe 100 million people are on Twitter? And how many of those people actually publish anything? So what you've got is you've got a closed loop system that back in the day, those would have been our sitcoms on television. That how something existed through time is that their message allowed the sponsors to sell more stuff. Okay. And gee whiz, isn't that what we're doing on Twitter as well? We're telling people what to buy, how to buy it, Instagram, all of that, all the influencers. And in addition to that, there are shills. There are people who are intentionally taking bad ideas and giving them mass and repeating them and retweeting and all that sort of thing, until it looks like to the quiet majority who's out there going through their life that really don't even care if Twitter exists or not. It's more of a direction to the companies that are and organizations that are kind of defenseless in terms of this glom of people out there. They don't have names. They don't have a location where you could go and try to win them over. They are being paid by people in many cases to continue a narrative. And how long does it take for the system to adjust again to where that is something like, remember MySpace? Remember America Online?
Well, these are just the latest tools,
Yes.
and technology is leverage for voices that maybe were in smaller pockets to get in groups, and it's just about the power of community. So for us, it might be Twitter. For kids, it's TikTok. I mean, and whatever the next thing is, the next thing is. It's important to know as a leader for yourself that your community doesn't have to be an accident. In fact, it shouldn't.
Right.
And then when I talk about community, it's having, I mean, we have to move beyond this fact that people who have coaches have somehow failed. Every single successful athlete has a coach, and they don't fire their coaches when they win the big tournament. And those coaches are part of a community that helps them move forward, become their best, calls them on their crap when they got either head trash or they're not getting it. And if you just allow yourself to fall into a community, then you are who you're surrounded with. So as a leader, you must be in the right community. In my view, you should have a coach, not just because I am an executive coach, but because I know the value of the process, and that everybody who's successful should have one. And you have to create that and provide that for your team. It's not just about you, but how can you leverage that so your team has access to or becomes the community that moves forward to serve your client or your customer. And we see the big brands do this, right? You see Apple will do this. You'll see Harley Davidson will do this. You'll see the car brand will all have communities around them. I have a little boat. It's a Boston Whaler. There's a Boston Whaler community. And people are dying for that. And as a leader, you have to seek out the communities that'll serve you and jettison the ones that won't.
Great thought. And that initiates a conversation about how all powerful you and I are.
I don't know about
all
that.
Everything starts with speaking and listening, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's really kind of silly for us to think that we're lighting the candle here and causing a world that works, but we're kind of crackpots, aren't we? I think the whole idea is that we could be talking about anything. We could be talking about what we watched on Instagram yesterday and on Snapchat and TikTok and all that sort of thing. And at the same time, what we're really interested in here is that somebody somewhere is going to listen to this podcast and hear what Doug's had to say. And it's going to resonate with that person. And they're either going to reach out to Doug, which we're going to talk about a little bit coming up here, or they're going to say, how do I find more information about this guy online that I could probably bring into my community? There are folks that I know. I worked for 15 years as a volunteer leader for the Downtown Revitalization Task Force, Neighborhood Revitalization Zone in the state of Connecticut, with a bunch of people at the state level and at the national level. And we went around, in the 1990s, and we visited Roxbury, Massachusetts, in Boston. We went to Philadelphia. I went to a national COPS conference, in Austin, Texas, where there were over 3,000 people that came from all over North America, including Mexico and Canada. And what we came away from all of that work with is we went on hold for a while, and all of the ground that we took in terms of people treating each other better and differently, and really being interested in how do we fit into the community, and how do we have a cooperative competition, and how do we support each other in having a safe place to live, and have enough food, and have a roof over all of our heads, and be able to go to bed every night knowing that you'll wake up in the morning, as opposed to being shot through a wall. So we find ourselves where there's just so much noise out there in so many different areas. And I'd like to hear, when we're talking about partnership, there's this whole notion of rhetoric and demagoguery. And those, we can go back and we can talk about its early days with the Greeks and the Romans, and how you stood up in front of a group of people and incited them to do the good thing, the right thing, or whatever it is that you wanted them to do. How do you choose, as a listener, what you're going to listen to, and where you're going to get your empowerment from, and what you're going to actually spend your time thinking about?
Well, I think it, for me, Bill, everything comes back to what is your purpose? Because that purpose, the why you do what you do and the outcome you want, that drives your priorities. It goes into your plan of how you're going to spend your time. It gives you power. And so you have to be in touch. And I think people are, what are you trying to create, and why does it matter? And then what problems are you solving for people, and who are those people? And those are the North Stars. It's all P's, by the way. But those are the things that drive everything else. And so your choices about how you spend your time, who you listen to, what priorities you give, all goes back to, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your purpose? And I still believe that there are the vast majority of people who, if they just allow themselves to think about this, like it's okay to think about what your purpose is, and not just ride the wave of life wherever it takes you, and use that to set your priorities and your plan. That people are fundamentally good. They want to do the right thing. They want to help each other. They want to provide for their families. They want to foster their community and get involved. And when people get lost and pulled by the day-to-day, knee deep in the hoopla, as the song goes from the 80s, going back to purpose, what are you trying to accomplish and why?
Mm-hmm.
That can get so many people back on a path, or maybe to a path that they're supposed to be on. And from that, what they pay attention to. We have to be mindful, and I'm not talking, like a lot of stuff about mindfulness out there. I'm talking about be aware, intentionally aware of the choices you're making and how you're spending your time and attention. And try to have that aligned in some way with what your purpose is. Because if you're not aware, if you're mindless, if you are caught on the doom scroll, then you're not in control.
Well, there's a really interesting corollary to that, and that is, if you don't pick your destination in life, you're going on somebody else's journey,
And that's why I think the universe gives you breadcrumbs. I mean, the universal laws do work, and they will give you breadcrumbs if you just take a moment to sit, even if you want to call it sit in the silence, and be mindful. And when you open your eyes, see, whatever hits you, even if you're watching YouTube videos, what's the first one that pops in and that interests you? And then Of course, then you're going to get 1,000,002 YouTube videos that have the same thing. But and then if it resonates with you, it feels good. It just feels right. There's something in you that can jive with it. That it's part of you, or you can and take it in, and then that could change all the time. There's people that I used to follow that, that's like, and they haven't really evolved a lot, but I have. So now I'm on to the next kind of thing that I'm listening to, and reading and stuff like that. Everybody, I think, if you take the chance to learn more, open up your books, open up your internet to something that's not just today's news, and see what resonates with you and follow that breadcrumb to your next point that does fit your purpose. Even if you're not quite sure what your purpose is, you feel what feels right to you. And then take that next step, and it leads to the next step, and it all just feels right and resonate, and goes forward. And Bill, this with the law of attraction too. So
there's so much truth to that, is being aware of the opportunities in front of you. I've had a chance to do a lot of different things. It's because I've always been curious, and I've been alert for opportunities. And sometimes I would just go with it, and other times I wouldn't. But if I wasn't alert and aware of what was going on, I would never have had the chance to learn what I learned. And the danger we have with YouTube and social media is that it tends to feed us only what reinforces what we already believe.
Right.
And so leaders have to be intentional about getting other points of view, because one of the signs that you're failing as a leader is when everybody starts to agree with you.
Right.
There's the end of progress as we know it. No doubt. So the other thing that comes to mind is a lot of people who are listening. You talked about communities, and they're almost like this. The new design is an echo chamber where you only hear what you agree with, and only people that agree with you speak. And then anything else where you accidentally come across something on YouTube or all the rest of that. Again, that's a community too. You know how few people actually even spend any time looking at YouTube? As big a thing as that is for the people who use YouTube, and I'm one of them, there are many people who don't even bother going on. They think it's for cat videos. That's what goes on YouTube. I probably have binge watched 40 hours of Jordan Peterson over the last 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Just because he's such a fascinating human being. And he is, in terms of what we used to call verbal volleyball, as far as I'm concerned, he's the master. And the master knows how to make people enjoy his dialogue and how he will diagram and pick apart an idea down to the nits and the history of it, and how people behave, and the psychological aspect to it, as well as the physical. And so I say Jordan Peterson, and I want to say that if we get 1,000 listeners to this podcast, along with Doug Brown, he's probably somebody you're going to want to go listen to, because he teaches objectivity. He teaches you to listen not for what's true, but what seems to make sense for you, and how can you learn more about it, just to kind of summarize all of that. And I guess that's really what we're up to here, is not to give you our ideas like they're the right thing or the good thing or the best things, but if there's something that we say that kind of stimulates some thought and that you can take away from this and use it, and leverage the law of attraction, because as Doug said, what you listen to and who you surround yourself by, that's who you are and who you become. So Doug, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do so?
Thanks, Bill. My direct email address is Doug, DOUG, at Summit, SUMMIT dash, the little dash sign, success.com. And I'm going to put a little resource out there for your listeners as well. I'll put it at Summit Success, that's summit-success.com/candle. I'll create a little landing page. I've got a piece on leadership, and a piece on something that we kind of touched around, and it's how to say no to the things that no longer serve you without being negative.
Right.
So I'll provide that, make that available for listeners, and I'm on LinkedIn as well.
That's excellent. Do you have any YouTube videos that you've authored?
Yes, I've got quite a few, a lot of publishing on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So on that page, summitsuccess.com/candle, I'll put a link into the YouTube page as well.
Awesome. And then that way we're lighting the candle and passing it on.
Absolutely, and I'll watch for this to be live on the Facebook community and be out there. People can ask questions there as well.
Terrific. So with this, Lisa, you have any summary thoughts, to kind of wrap up today?
Well, I just the thoughts that leadership is what you make of it. I think, and we can make it a better forum or place to stand from if everybody has that quality of raising people up to be at their level and beyond.
Absolutely fantastic. Doug, any final thoughts?
I think the final thought is leadership is something that can be learned. It must be learned. And there's a direct line between a leader's ability and how they execute and profitability and living a great life.
Excellently said. So I'm going to close by just saying what my grandfather used to say to me, and I didn't really get to know him very well because by the time I was in 8th grade, he was gone. But one thing he always said to me that I took away, and he said, I'm going to tell you from my own experience that you should never believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. Be curious about everything. Take nothing, as gospel, not even the gospel. Go and read what it's about. Who wrote it? What were they thinking? What were they doing? So I say to you, be entertained by what you hear, but don't believe it. Do your own research, be really curious, and keep coming up with better and better questions. And by all means, light the candle and make the world work. It's up to you and me. Adios, guys. Thank you again. We'll be back again next Thursday where we will be lighting the candle and making the world work. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you both.
Bye for now.
Have a good week.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.